Hey there, hi, welcome to This Imaginary Life. It's kind of like car talk, except for tabletop RPGs, and that's what this show is. I have on several good buddies who are all experienced game masters of tabletop RPGs. My name's Rich, and we have Judd on. How are you doing, Judd?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Fantastic. And next we have Lowell. Hello, Lowell.
Hello.
And then last but not least, but last only because his name's like Strash, which is alphabetically after the other two. Strash, how are you?
Doing well, doing well.
Good, good, good. All right, so as we have, ever since Judd said this was the best idea, we will lead off with, we had given 2 minutes when there was always like this 25 to 35 second, like I don't know what else to say thing. So we're cutting it down to save you that uncomfortable silence. So now it's 90 seconds of awesome. It's like Uncle Ben's instant rice about tabletop RPGs. So who wants to step up to the timer first?
I will, I guess, if everybody.
All right, Judd, you are on the clock. Go ahead and go, sir.
Cool. I got this book, and I can't pronounce the name, Lusus Naturae, by Raphael Chandler and Jennifer Bone. It is a monster manual, and I'm addicted to monster manuals, so I could not say no to this. And it is really upsetting. It's a lot of lamentations of the Flame Princess monsters, so they're upsetting. You might remember my review of Raphael's old other monster manual, the Terratatic Tome, which I really liked, except I thought the penis to vagina ratio was off. I will say that in Naturae, it's still off, but there's a little bit more dong. I feel like what I've said has you know, I'm turning the tide slowly but surely. I just want monster manual writers to realize that like penises are just as frightening as vaginas. It's a humble goal, but it's what I've got. Usually I just chew through a monster manual, and I really find this one so upsetting that I'm taking it very slowly and in pieces. There's one monster that floats on the spirits of dead babies. That's the first monster. And I read that one and then kind of closed the book, and I was like, all right, I'm going to take a rest. So it's good. If Lamentations of the Flame Princess is your thing, then you should probably get it. And good work, Raphael and Jennifer. Thumbs up.
Wow. I'm speechless.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got it all in there. I don't know. But
That was impressive and horrific. Sweet. Either of you guys want to go next? You want me to go?
I'll go.
Sweet. You are on the clock, Lowell. What is in your gaming world?
So, not too long ago, went to Origins, got a chance to play with Rich in person, face-to-face, ran a couple of games at Games on Demand, and then Rich was made to run a bunch of other games on demand, outside of Games on Demand, and so that was truly awesome. I wanted to mention actually a couple of things about previous episodes of This Imaginary Life. Like a few episodes ago, somebody mentioned the idea of putting the plot points at the beginning of sessions down on index cards and kind of holding them up to players right at the start. And I think it was John or Strauss, I can't remember who said that. And I started using that like right after that, and that is awesome. Dynamite, it works, the players love it. I use it in all the games. It's a superior, easy technique, and it's really, 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 really been really good. Other thing is, you guys did that episode on endings, and I watched it, and then I got to a session like almost immediately after that, and everything from that went out of my head, and I just kind of shut an episode down early, and like after everybody walked out the door, I was like, oh, you know what? They had all these suggestions about how to wrap and I didn't do any of them. Died on the table there. It was really, I felt bad. So you should go back and watch previous episodes because they're useful, and I wish I had paid more attention a couple of times. So I think that's what I have to say there. Am I close on my time?
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
This 90-second thing is really working for us.
yeah,
tell you.
really.
We only ever had 90 seconds of content, really. That was it. Well, Strash, I'm going to make you go last. We'll save the best for last. All right, here we go. All right, so this is me. I want to first talk about what I call my podcast palooza. I have had, through cajoling multiple people who do podcasts I love to listen to, I am currently playing in a game that has two people from the Jankcast and Larry from Tabletop Superhighway. I was able to kind of horn my way in to a Dungeon World game that's coming up in just a few weeks that is run by none other than Jason from the Gauntlet podcast. My every other Monday night group now is routinely Lowell, the genius behind Play on Target, and I think there's some other people who do some other things. I'm mostly it's like Lowell and then breaks from Lowell as other guys talk. Love you guys too, but it's like a Lowell show for me. I'm sorry. So it's been super awesome for me to play with podcast people because it's neat to listen to them talk on podcasts and then I game with them. I feel like I'm gaming with celebrities. It's really awesome. I am about to run, after wanting to run it for 2 years, since then, maybe more, Wandering Monsters High School, which is a game I kickstarted a long time ago, and it is about wandering monsters from like a fantasy world who are in high school. That's, the names there it is, the whole thing, and I can't wait to run it. 7 players though. I'm freaked out. How do you do that over Hangout? I got to figure that out, and I've got 4 seconds, so that's my whole 90 seconds.
Nice.
The end. I had 2 seconds left, but I'm not giving them. All right, Strash, you ready to go?
I am ready, sir.
All right, you are on the clock. Go, Strash.
All right. So what's happening in my gaming world? So I moved in sort of like the middle of last year, and I've actually been devoid of cons. And you're actually catching me right before I pack to go play Northwest for the first time.
Nice.
So I'm actually super excited because I talk a lot to a number of the West Coast designers, but I've never actually met them in person. So, for example, I love all his games, I play all his games, I run all his games, but I've never actually met John Harper face to face. So this is going to be like my first shot. So I don't know. It's going to be pretty cool. I'm excited about it. Other than that, let's see. There's been a lot of Blades in the Dark in my life. QS3 is just dropping, so my whole group's pretty excited about that. I've been working with a number of people on a number of games. Most notably, I've been working with Kit on his Regency era game Arcadia, and I've been working with my friend John LaBeouf Little on his cyber noir game Piece of Work. And also, there was a gigantic 12-person multi-table crazy game of Atlas Reckoning, which is my Pacific Rim style game playtest in New York City, thanks to the very awesome crew there. So I've been updating that, working on that, getting it a little bit more polished, and I think probably official beta that's going to be public is going to be out here shortly. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I knew Brendan was in on that big long con of that.
Yeah, he was playing the rookie, and I have some pictures of him being very excited. It was awesome.
He pulls off really excited well. So perfect casting there. All right, so the main topic for tonight is PrEP, which you would know if you'd read the YouTube or if you're looking at the Hangout where it says PrEP. PrEP. So what we're going to do is kind of roundtable and popcorn discuss how it is that we prepare ourselves and prepare our game to be played, whether it's a con scenario, a campaign, a mini series of one shot. There are lots of different ways to approach PrEP. I want to lead off with Lowell. You actually have a poll that you had submitted to random people on the internet, and so that's going to give us the answers that we need, right? I think that's what we lead off with.
No, it's not going to give us the answers that we need. Back in February, March, I did 2 different sort of open SurveyMonkey surveys, in part because actually Rich and I had some discussions and had seen some people talking about having done just really huge amounts of prep for some things that I was like, I wonder what people are actually doing. And so I did 2 surveys. One of them is on campaign prep. I'm going to kind of leave that aside. It has a smaller pool, but I got about 300 plus respondents to the session prep survey through RPG Geek and G+ and the RPG subreddit. and got some useful information. Again, purely anecdotal, purely self-responding, no controls. This is all, up in the air. There's no scientific basis to this. But when I came through, I had about 304 useful responses, and the average stated prep time that people said was about 2.5 hours of prep for any particular session. And so that was sort of the average time, and that's matched up to an average session length of about 4 hours. So that's where most people fell in the curve. Of course, there's some people, a handful that were doing 9 hours of prep for a session, and a handful that were doing no prep for a session. The numbers are really, really interesting to see. Now, I also did a sort of sub-part of that particular survey that asked, okay, what are you actually doing? How do you break up your percentages of time? And from that, I got about 150 responses on that. And it broke down, and these are arbitrary categories, so people were probably going to define them themselves. I had some notes on it, but about 25% of the time was spent inventing incidents, creating incidents, about 14% creating NPCs, 12% doing research, which includes reading new rules and stuff, 12% developing background, 8% of the time statting adversaries, 7% of the time bookkeeping, 6% of the time player contact, 6% of the time physical prep, 5% of the time session prep, and 4% of the time artwork. Now, of course, that's all averaged across 150 respondents, so that kind of falls to the midpoint of those things. But I thought that was really interesting, especially that creating incidents does seem to be sort of the major thing, by about double on that. But 2.5 hours is kind of more than I expected to be the average. But again, I'm not running games that are usually that high prep.
Doesn't surprise me for people that play games that are a little crunchier, larger rule books, where you have stat blocks to prepare. There's a lot of kind of bookkeeping and prep there, map related things where plots are intricate and interwoven into the mechanics. I could see that. I mean, when I ran my 7-year-long vampire campaign, I'd say that I had about a 1-to-1 ratio of time spent to game actually played. And that was a weekly game, which ran on average 8 to 12 hours. So
how much did you actually use? Like, I understand that you did prep, because I had a buddy who did a lot of prep, and then when we talked about it after a game, it turned out to be a big security blanket. Like, he used some of it, but definitely not all of it. So, Rich, like, an average week, you game for 8 hours, you prep for 8 hours. Wow. What of that 8 hours, like, what percentage of that did you use at the table? And it doesn't have to be that week. Like, it can be ever, but...
Understood. Let me lead off by saying that was college Rich. That was a long time ago, Rich, when Rich had lots of free time.
I know.
Things that I did, I would look up in I had a game set slightly in the past, so I actually had an almanac. I would look up for events that were taking place during the 2-week period that I would target for the game, just so I could have some background events that were going on throughout, and I could seed it in, the real-life stuff. I found the U.S. Naval Military Observatory for exactly when the sun rose and set, which is kind of important for vampires, I would think. It also gave me the phase of the moon when someone begged to play a Glasswalker. So I seeded that into my one sheet. I went through scenarios in basically the plot web for everybody that all the NPCs and what they were up to and kind of their background. And how much did I use is kind of the question you asked. 10%, maybe.
Okay. But I mean, that's a humble estimate, because you got to figure that some of that didn't necessarily go into it, but it went into giving you confidence to do other things and make the world more rich, right? More not Richard, but rich.
No, I got you. I also scored major scenes. Like I would go through and pick through music and burn CDs. This would
Yeah,
be the CD for this game session.
wow. Follow-up question. Here's the big one for all prep for me, and that is, did you ever resent it? Were you ever like doing prep and slaving and being like, fucking players didn't even fucking blah blah blah, and now I'm doing prep? Did that ever happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
it was not a majority of the time. It was a minority. It was that the adage of like, what was the best laid plans of a GM meet first contact with the player? That little adage type thing. That
Yeah.
rarely happened to me because I was like, this is what the sunrise is. This is what the sunset is. This is
Right.
what was going on in the real world. So that stuff. I mean, how do you? It's incontrovertible. It's just
Yeah.
background.
Nice. That's
See,
good. It sounds like good prep.
for me, it was about 2002, maybe, I think, and I was doing one of the fantasy campaigns, and I was flipping around and working on stuff and doing some gazetteer stuff and working on these things, and Sherry said, "You don't use that shit at the table. Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, the players don't read the stuff I post online. And none of this stuff really comes up when I'm writing it out in full longhand stuff. Yeah, let's not do this anymore." And I really kind of overnight changed from doing 4 or 5 hours of prep for a session to down to an hour or so.
Cool. Interesting.
So I'm gonna reveal a dirty secret. I also had my 7-year vampire campaign and kind of thing, and now
Solidarity.
yeah. Dark Ages for me though. But I had actually the only 7-year game I ran was Earthbound. I think Vampire was 5, but still same ballpark. But this is a secret, and this is not a huge secret. When Apocalypse World came out, for me it was less about some sort of mind-blowing new technique, and it was more like, oh yeah, I do this all the time. And so even though I had this extensive game, now mind you, I'm blessed, right? Like I know that this is a thing that I have that maybe not everyone has, but I have. My friends refer to it as the steel trap. I've had a friend walk up to me and ask me what the glitch with his video card was 12 years ago, and I was able to recall it. So I kept all the NPCs and stuff in my head, but for the most part, I wouldn't be doing virtually any prep. Like a lot of it was about how to make GM moves at the right time and how to like push in certain ways and how to incentivize players and stuff like that. So I think for me, I never actually did all that much prep, and I cheated a lot of the time. Like I remember when I was running more trad games, like when I was running something like 3 and 3.5, a lot of times I would just open a book, pick out an appropriate EL stat block, and just be like, oh, is this a giant? Well, now it's this other thing that I made up for my game, and I'm just gonna, is this this power is supposed to mimic? Yeah, now it's this completely other thing, and we're done. And so like a lot of times I'd just be running it straight out of the book. Like I wouldn't even, I would just cook up things on the spot, and my players couldn't tell, and a lot of them would ask me. They'd be like, "Oh, do you have all these plans?" And at the time, I was younger, so of course I was like, "Oh yes, I have all these plans." But no, the truth is, I never actually did any of that. So it's kind of I'm the black sheep here. So
I remember being that age, like in college, that college, lots of time on your hands age, and I was obsessed with what makes a game good and how much I needed down to get it good. And I figured out that I could do it. I could have a good 4 hours, 4 to 8 hours, or however long of gaming if I had one sheet of paper with a list of names of NPCs and a short description. And I was like, if I have that, I can probably get to a good game. But yeah, it's interesting. It's just always fascinating to me what people, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Heavy prep.
Well, and it's interesting that Strauss used the word cheat to describe that manipulation of stuff, because I do think that there's still some of that attitude that if you're changing that stuff around, it's cheating. When it, or at least it's in the back of the head that maybe we're not playing right or something.
It depends on what you're playing. Like I've been playing Dungeon Crawl Classics lately, and I've been running pre-published modules, which actually is a lot more prep than I'm really used to be perfectly honest, because you really have to know these places really well. And at one point, I just wasn't confident that I knew it, and the dungeon was kind of complicated. And so I actually like sat my girlfriend down and I was like, all right, you're just gonna walk into rooms and manipulate things, and I'm gonna describe it to you. And we ended up I just ran her on a game like alone. But I just wanted to be able to describe just how you describe the environments and the words you choose is hugely important in those dungeon crawls, and your word choices are really important. And a lot of the really important details are like the key that sometimes if the module is the way it's written, the key that's really important to get into the secret place in level C is in room 2A, but it's buried in a paragraph. So you totally forget about it. And I was like, I can't forget that this damn key is here. I was fascinated by how like modules come with prep of their own, and like you can't. It's not really fair or fun to like change things at that point, because part of the thing is like there's an environment and you're walking through it, and you know I don't want to change it. I want to run by it, and it's well crafted. If it's well written. I want to do what I don't know. I want to run the module. You know. It's interesting. Anyway, that's all. Prep. It fascinated me to know that like I thought like, you know, modules for a lot of time I was really snooty about modules, and now I find that like there's a whole skill set to running them all on their own, which is interesting.
Yeah, I don't run them because they're just too much work.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I really love modules. Like I taught myself how to GM with Dungeon Magazine.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neat.
I was just string together dungeon magazines until enough had happened to where, we now have a world and we have characters that want to do things. And
yeah. That's fantastic.
To me, so prep helps you feel comfortable, right? It's your training wheels. It's also when you have the time. And when it really tickles your fancy, it's really fun to prep because you're spending time kind of immersing yourself in that world. You know, I'm going through and I'm thinking about what would that look like. Imagine when you're going through the module, Judd, you're picturing it in your head, and there's definitely an exercise there. You call it prep like it's work, but we get more time in this fascinating imaginary world than anybody else at the table.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's that lonely fun to a long degree until you reach the point where it's work or you resent your players or you don't have time, you can't get to it, and you feel really uncomfortable at the table. And so that's that weird fulcrum point of going from this is a fun activity to holy shit, would you guys just like actually make plans and stop looking at me to do my dance monkey dance? That was a long time ago, though.
So that's a phrase that I've actually heard a lot. Lonely fun, and I've struggled with it a lot because to me it's actually not fun. Part of the reason why I like RPGs is because I get to play with friends as opposed to just by myself. And so my tendencies in terms of choosing the games that I play have veered off partially because of exactly this. It's the fact that I oftentimes look for games that are low prep. But what's interesting to me is like in my home like I run a lot of play tests for people, and so like a lot of times I will get a game and we'll play it 2-3 times and I'll send back these very lengthy reports. And so one of the things that I've realized is that part of my prep is read the game and then try and visualize the scenario and then run through the mechanics in my head so that when it happens I'm prepared to answer questions and stuff like that. And so, I mean, I read like 50 to 100 games a year, so some of them are 4 pages, but some of them are really not, and so that eats up a lot of my time. But as I've kind of looked into it and thought about it, one of the things that I've really started appreciating, I give a little like, woo, DCC in chat when Judd said it. One of the things that I've really started to appreciate and sort of draw on is a lot of like random tables and tables that help you like get through stuff very quickly. So games that provide very flavorful name lists that can inspire NPCs very quickly, that's valuable to me. One of the things that I really like about Blaze in the Dark is if my PC goes and gets their Vice on and they spend some money, they're supposed to get potentially a lead. And I can't just randomly come up with a full adventure on the spot, but on the other hand, there is a quick job generator. And so I can just like roll a couple of times, and if the first job is like completely nonsensical, doesn't make any sense for the situation that they're in, I just roll again. I'm like, oh, this sounds good, and then I have enough of a seed that I can work from. So building the toolkit, right? Like generating those tables, making those hooks, writing up things that could happen in the following weeks, and then using and reusing it, is something that I have done for prep, and I think is potentially valuable.
Yeah. Nice.
Judd, what do you do for DCC, right? But what other prep? Like when you ran Burning Wheel.
Yeah. It depends on the game. Like there are some games where I've decided for Burning Wheel that there was one campaign I ran where I decided I was going to burn up every character a player had a relationship with. And it was only 2 players, right? So it's not that big a deal. So it was like I burned up about 4 characters. But the interesting thing about Burning Wheel is that when you burn up a character, you learn a bunch about them. So these NPCs became so much more in depth. Like I just learned things about them. Oh, I didn't know that they did this. I didn't know that they had done that. It was really, really cool. That helped, but it was something I wanted to do. When I ran a game for a Burning Wheel set in the Forgotten Realms, the players were totally into like geeking out about the realm. So I burned up, Kelvin Blackstaff, and I burned up a bunch of NPCs for the realms, and I burned up the Beholder, who lived under Waterdeep, and I did a bunch of monster burning and made a bunch of traits. But I wanted to do that. Like those were things I wanted to do to kind of get a grip on the realms and to get a better grip on certain things of Burning Wheel. So I feel like when I do prep, it's something that I want to do. But in general for Burning Wheel, I don't do a whole lot. And sometimes that can be difficult, especially if I've got an NPC and they get hurt, and I've got to know how hurt they are. I've got to look at their tolerance tables. I have to kind of shuffle around and find something in the book that is, that is an NPC that has something kind of that is somewhat, equivalent, and that can be difficult. That's not always easy. I don't know. And also if I have to do a versus roll, I'll always I'll write down that NPC's name and be like, oh, by the way, they have stealth 3, or they have, what murder-wise 4, and I'll just try to keep that in mind. So if it ever comes up again, I can do that. I have not figured out a system for cataloging NPCs and the info I have on them, and I've tried index cards with all their names on them, and it grows too fast and becomes too crazy. So with Burning Wheel, I don't know, it becomes kind of big and a little bit difficult. It's never been terrible, but it's rough. It's not always easy. Definitely.
Well, you've got a weekly group that you've been running for a while. How do you prep week to week for that game?
So I got, what is it now, 3 face-to-face campaigns are bi-weekly. Most of them are players have been through those games for a number of weeks, a number of years. And I keep track of NPCs through my wife because she remembers the name of every NPC. So I can say, oh, what's the guy's name for blah, 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 who did this, and she'll give me the names. That's easy. And I print out pictures, and we have a picture book of things to go with that. But every week I do about an hour of prep, and all it is before the game I sit down and I have a whole different set of sheets or pages, like little worksheets that I'll go through. One of them is, okay, here's the name of every PC, and write down 3 things for them. I've got another one that's just a set of questions. I've also got a fate worksheet that I think Sophie Legace put together that I use, and I'll spend maybe an hour while I'm eating or screwing around getting things set up doing that, and then I don't look at it when I run. But because I've written stuff out and I've kind of brainstormed ahead of time, then I have that in my head when I run. But I never look at my notes when I'm running if I can help it. But I have the advantage that we're playing action cards. I wrote it. We've been playing it for 12, 14 years, so I know the system really well. So I don't have to fall back on any of that stuff. It's a little bit different when I run online, but face to face, it's like that.
Cool. Strash said he has some show and tell he wanted to grab. So some of the things that I do for prep now, first of all, game choice, right? Strash mentioned low prep games. So that person I talked about before that spent all that time doing prep, that is not me anymore. I just don't have the time to commit to prep when I'm playing in a whole lot of games, and prep does feel a little bit like work now. So I try to choose games that don't require gigantic stat blocks, don't require a lot of maps and other background work. Normally don't play really long campaigns unless it's over play-by-post. And those is, you're always prepping because you're always playing and you have everything written down. So going back in your notes is just rereading scenes in the game, so it's really easy. So that's one thing. But yeah, notes on, to me, my prep is notes on what does each player character want to achieve and where are they against that? What is each player, what have I observed them being the most engaged in? And then just a mental clock on how much screen time has everybody gotten in the last session or so that I can shift things around. I really got that from Primetime Adventures. That gave me a really good eyeball on keeping track of, has everybody had a chance to get something about them. And that's something that I love about Lady Blackbird, because what I do with Lady Blackbird, you get XP for keys, and keys are the things that are what your character's about. And I use poker chips. So instead of people marking things on sheets that I can't see, I'm doling out those poker chips, or they're grabbing it from the center pot, and then I can see at a glance, okay, it looks like Snargle hasn't hit his key in a while. And so to me, that prep is making sure at the table everybody's getting some equal time, or I'm trying to hit all the highlights for everybody. That's my prep in between sessions, but it's also it's also a thing that happens at the table. Strash, you had some show and tell? Did you?
Yeah, actually, I vanished for a split second. I was. This is actually one of the questions I was asked earlier, and this is actually important, is that we do different kinds of prep for different kinds of games. And so I was bringing a little bit of show and tell. These are actually what I refer to as my con prep packets. So before I go to any convention, if I'm going to be running 2 or 3 games or something like that, or if I just want to have some games on me in case somebody wants to do a pickup, I make these little binders. And I have a set of things that is usually in my bag. Like I have little whiteboards that you can write people's names and stuff on, and I can pass them out. I have like dry erase markers, pencils, erasers, all that good stuff, index cards galore. But I think what's really cool about these is they actually pop out, and then I have actually loose pages in here, which are character sheets, but they're also something that I do for myself. One of the things that Judd asked is he asked about efficiency of prep, right? Like how much of your materials do you actually use? And so one of the things that I have found efficient is, in particular, if I'm going to be running a game and I have to go over specific rules, I will make myself little reminder sheets or little cheat sheets. They're usually just oversized index cards, and what it has is a list of things. Like, for example, like when introducing the game, and then I'll do like the 10 bullet points. Like talk about A, B, C, D, make sure the players are on board with this. And then I have a little room to usually like write down which touchstones they're familiar with. So like if I'm writing Swords Without Master, which is a sword and sorcery game, I will ask what sword and sorcery books or movies or cartoons did you watch? And then when I'm talking about the game, I can use those touchstones to connect back to them so that they can follow along. So one of the things that I do, again, I do put some time in these. I do these little con prep things, and there is actually time. Like this is my bootleggers packet. There is some time invested in a couple of these because one of the things that I do is I will laminate sheets of paper and then hand them a dry erase marker. So if I run the table, I can just erase it with a microfiber cloth, and the next table is ready to go. So I would say that there's a couple of hours invested in these, but I feel like it's well worth it. I don't know if I would classify it as lonely fun, but I find that I've run dozens of games out of these, and so it's a little bit different than your weekly game. I don't laminate sheets for my weekly games, but that's what I'm going to talk about. So.
Well, why would you laminate weekly game sheets when you're only playing it for like 2 or 3 sessions? I mean, come on, Strash.
Yeah.
Playtesting everything. So.
I think, like modules, I find that when I'm going to do a one-shot, I end up doing more prep for that. than I do for the weekly stuff. But there's a lot more sort of building structure there. So there's a very cool packets. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, I like that too.
I want to jump in for just one more thing.
Yes.
And this is actually something that we haven't talked about, but I'm curious if you guys do it. This might just be a me thing. I know that when I'm running a specific style of game, one of the things that I do, and I wouldn't necessarily consider it prep, I think it's a natural extension of it, is oftentimes I will consume media of the right type. So, for example, if I'm playing Blades in the Dark, or if I'm running Blades in the Dark, I'll replay Dishonored, or maybe I'll, listen to some, I'll watch some music, movies, or listen to some music that's, appropriately in genre. And I think that it's when my head is in the right brain space for a game, it sort of incites that in me, and then when I consume media of the correct type, it helps me bring things to life and helps me notice things that I can then incorporate or play off of. So I don't know if you guys do anything like that.
Yeah, without a doubt. And Dishonored 2 Blades in the Dark is exactly the one-to-one that I also did recently. So, yeah, good one.
There's some cool steampunk wushu stuff that, and some real modern stuff in the last 5 or 6 years that I've been rewatching because I would like to flavor Blades in the Dark that way. So I've certainly been kind of thinking about that and absorbing media for that.
You should provide a list of that. I only know of one steampunk wushu media piece.
I'll get you a list of those.
Nice, nice. Judd, do you want to talk a little bit about random tables?
Yes, I do. I really like random tables. They can be really helpful as prep. I feel like there are two different types that I primarily use. There is a hard-lined, so I ran a game of Lamentations of the Flame Princess where the characters were part of this adventurers and salvage union, and they could go into any monsters, and the city decided who was a monster and who wasn't, which is metaphorically really, really, really fucked up. But they could pretty much kick down their door and take their stuff, right? If they're just declared a monster. So there's the more like random encounter table type thing where it's like, what do you run into when you're into the city? Corrupt city guard, toughs looking for their cut, a wizard's creation gone amok, a rival party of adventurers, 2d20 zero-level humans forming a mob to kill a monster in their neighborhood, a monster on the run looking to get out of here and will pay you to get you out. So that's stuff they're actually going to run into. And then there's like how I created monsters, which is not stuff. It's just a bunch of labels, right? So there's what kind of monster it is, wizard, vampire, golem, god, refugee. Then a descriptor, fire, shadow, deep sea, lightning. Then where it lives, cemetery, manor, sewer, tower. And then what kind of social class it has, poverty, working, or leisure. And so then, I roll it, and I end up with all these crazy shit. And it allows me to roll a bunch of 4d4 and give the players a bunch of jobs right off the bat. Usually I would do this beforehand so I could have maps and stuff. But, I end up with a deep-sea vampire living in the sewer who's also of leisure, so he has a lot of money. Why is this guy, or why is this vampire, deep-sea vampire living in the sewer who has a lot of money? I don't know. There's a wizard. There's a wizard who uses lightning, who lives in a manor, and he's working class. There's a golem who's from the deep sea, who is from the sewer, and he's living in poverty, or it's living in poverty. There's a god refugee of fire, and it's living in the sewer. And you end up with all this crazy stuff, and it's inspirational. You don't have to. You can roll it and then be like, oh wow, like I rolled it, and I don't know what I rolled, but I ended up with this dinosaur goddess. She was called She Who Has a Feathered Crown because I was fascinated by the fact that dinosaurs have feathers now, and the PCs got to like fight a T-Rex dinosaur goddess in the street with muskets. That was pretty cool. But so I think there are two types of random tables you can use. You can use tables that have a list of things that you really like, hard-coded random encounter, or you can have kind of inspirational stuff. And with the inspirational stuff, I like to have more than one descriptor, all kind of, a bunch of different tables. You roll 3d6 or whatever, and then they come together to form something that inspires you to make something else. And you can make, instead of, you can define a whole setting by that, by going through the regions and making a different table for every little thing. It's not easy, but it's possible. The other thing I would recommend is if there's something in the random encounter table that you think is so cool that you just find yourself praying to God that you roll it, take it off the random encounter table and just put it in the game. You don't leave a cool thing to chance. Like, if there's something so awesome, then just make it happen. But yeah, random encounter tables are really fun. They're pretty fast. You can roll a bunch of stuff before the game even starts, and you can kind of seed things in different places, and so you can do your prep that way, and it just kind of takes it out of your hands. So just kind of gives you something to fall back on if you're wondering what to say, which is really what all this is about, right? I'm going to sit around with my friends for 4 to 8 hours. What am I going to say during that time? This is one thing that'll tell you what to say. That's all.
Cool. Talking about the tables and creating regions, that was one of my favorite parts of Keelstone, which is a game that Levi Cornelson created, which is kind of a drift of Volant by Clash Ballet. In it, there are 7 floating island nations, and they're table generated for religion and kind of how they're governed and everything, and that was a really fun session. I mean, it was the whole session. There was no actual talking of funny voices, but the creating of the islands was pretty fun. I agree. Lowell, you mentioned that you might want to talk about Unframed.
Oh yeah. So just on sort of the improv side of things, Gnome Stew put out improv Unframed, which is a guide to improv for GMs. It's a set of essays, and I would say that it's pretty good. There's some repetition about sort of the yes and principles in it, but there are probably half a dozen really solid pieces in there with ideas and techniques for improvisation and how to build your notes to support improvisation. And Vincent Baker has like an essay that has 4 or 5 really awesome techniques, and in one in particular I've used all the time since I read it, and it's amazing. And it's simply that whenever you go into a scene or meet a new person or go to an encounter, you always describe one odd detail about the person, about the place, about the thing. And this is the first time I had read it, and I started using that, and it changes up the tone. It gives you a great hook to hang things on. And it's just a very simple improv technique that helps you as the GM remember to do details when you're actually running. And the book has a whole bunch of really good stuff like that. Robin Laws talks about petitioners and grantors and how you do NPC conversations and stuff. And so it's really, if you're interested in improvisation, besides something like Play Unsafe or Johnston's Impro, this is probably one of the better books to read right now about that.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, thanks, Lowell. It's you mentioned, and Josh actually mentioned it earlier. It's where my brain bounced in. Rules and tools, right? That's the prep. Is know the rules and have some tools to use. Judd, you mentioned that maybe we should talk. We've kind of briefly hinted at Apocalypse World. Josh talked about that as well. But do you want to lead us off a little talk through the Apocalypse World? Dungeon world of...
Yeah, I feel like those show some pretty nice, even if you don't like the games, the way that they show how to do prep is really interesting. Encouraging Dungeon World really encourages you to think about the greater forces at play in the world and how they're moving around each other. It's a type of game where you can pick up and play. You can play. I did play. I picked up and played a Dungeon World one-page adventure off of the one-page adventure contest. Played a game with a friend who was in town and wasn't going to come back, and my lady friend. And when it was done, I was like, oh, now I want to do the prep. And I did the prep, which was a terrible idea because it made me want to play really, really terribly. It's fun. It's fun prep. I think it gives you a cool idea of what's going on in the greater world. It gives you a lot to inspire from. It's just kind of good stuff. And the Apocalypse World stuff is like looking through, seeing what what's counting down, what's happening. It's important. I think it's cool to have stuff going on beyond the PCs and that they have to deal with. And both of those games do really interesting stuff with it. I think they're well worth looking at just for ways to make the world a bigger place than what's going on at the table. Kind of show that iceberg that's under the surface without having to be a college kid with 12 extra hours in the week to spare. I don't even know. I just don't even know where 12 hours are in my week. I have no idea. That's crazy to me to even think about that much time. But I know I did it. So yeah, it's just wild. And the other. I mean, my golden rule of prep is if you resent it, then you shouldn't do it. End of story. If you like it, if you're doing 20 hours of prep and you've got that time and you can do it and you love it, then God bless you. Do 20 hours of prep. That's awesome. And whether it comes out on the table or not, if that helps you, if you like it, if you want that excuse to daydream about your world, because that's the other thing this is. Like, it's stuff to say at the table, and it's an excuse to daydream, right? And if that's cool, then you should do it. I feel like sometimes, lots of prep gets poo-pooed, but it should only be, criticized if it's something that you resent. When I burned up 6 Burning Wheel characters, which would cause some people to have a fit and bite their own tongue, I really liked it. I liked doing it, and if I didn't, I wouldn't have done it. I never threw it in my players' faces. I never got upset about it. So, that's all.
Actually, I want to talk just a little bit more about what's really interesting about Apocalypse World is the prep for it, the 15 to 20 minutes or so that you do, like either right after game or at any point before next game, is really, really important. And not doing it, you will see a difference in your game, because one of the things that doing it does is it forces you to make the world a real force. And one of the things that's been really interesting to me about the evolution of Apocalypse World hacks, like the ones that you read, or at least the ones that I read that I consider like very serious hacks, really think about this question, right? And so like Dungeon World mostly sets up threats that the PCs have to encounter, right? And so like that frames very much the genre that it's in. Recently, it's on Kickstarter right now. Paul Riddle's Undying does some really interesting stuff about building predator society. And so Judd was actually just talking about, like, if you hate prep, don't do it. So I remember I was getting ready for one of my playtests just a couple weeks ago, and I panicked because it's the first Apocalypse World game that was like, no, before game 1 you have to do prep. And I was like, oh no, I have a half hour, what am I going to do? But it held my hand, it totally rocked, and it kind of showed me its version of that. And it was really cool because it actually came into play and it was really good. And so I think that's definitely something, is that even though it's not talked about as much as the player-facing moves or constructions of unique mechanisms about like falling to shadow and urban shadows or whatever, like I think that there is a lot of cool stuff being done on the GM side of things and thought about, and you can see it from game to game and how people are addressing things. Like since I was talking about it, Blaze in the Dark is in some ways a spiritual successor to this. But one of the things that's really cool about it is when your PCs take a downtime, as a GM, you advance faction clocks for all of the NPC factions. And so a lot of times I'll be running a downtime session, my PCs are talking about their next job and excited about making some money, and all of a sudden one of the clocks will finish ticking, and I'm like, oop, I know what's happening now. So I don't know, it's cool. I feel like games are doing some really interesting things with this stuff.
Yeah, that was something I liked about Spark, was there were factions, and the faction goals would happen in between sessions. Things happened, and the world moved, and it was pretty simple. And that's technically kind of a GM-less game. So it's pretty neat that the engine of the game progressed the world's driving fiction. Lowell, did you?
I was going to say there's some interesting things even in Fate games, like Legends of Angalaire has your various connections to people and communities and things like that you can draw on, but every time you do that, you essentially cause stress to them, and eventually you have to go and help them out, fix them, do some story that comes up as a result of that. That I think is, I mean, I love that we're involving player choices in those mechanical sides that end up bringing them stories around.
Oh man, that's a neat tangent. I could go on because you just kind of bubbled up in my brain some other games that do stuff like that. It's really cool. So, any last parting shots for talking about prep? I think it's a lonely fun. I think it can be. You should not resent it. If you've got the time and you want to invest it and daydream in that world, go ahead. If it's what you need to feel comfortable, go ahead. Don't feel bad about it, but you don't have to prep. It's not your job.
And it doesn't have to be lonely anymore. Like, you can go on Google Plus and like brainstorm ideas with hundreds and dozens and lots of gamers. So it's really you can outsource that stuff. But before I was really involved with online communities, I would go to my friends who weren't playing in a game, and I would say, hey, I need 8 siblings in this family. This is what the family's about. Pitch me 8 siblings, and your friends will or strangers, whoever you want, will give you ideas. You can crowdsource that stuff. So that's a fine way to do it too. And the bad ideas that you get are good because they kind of hone what you really want. You're like, oh no, I don't like that, and I know why, and it forces you to kind of think about it. So it doesn't have to be lonely fun. There's a whole community of GMs, DMs, and storytellers out there who will help you.
Absolutely, Judd. You're right. I misspoke because my wife is like the GM's assistant, and she knows it, right? I come to bed early and I'm like, hey, I want to talk to you about a thing. And a thing I was like in my brain that I need to noodle around to someone who's smart, and that's you, because you can't leave because you're sleepy.
That's super hot foreplay, Rich. Super hot.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. Well, we've talked a good bit about prep. I really appreciate everybody's opinions. If you've got some thoughts, viewers, and you do prep a totally different way, or if there are some other tools we haven't mentioned, some styles that you find interesting, feel free to share it with us, because just because we've got decades worth of experience doesn't mean we've done it all, and I'm always willing to listen to new ways to do the thing that we love doing. So, Judd, Lowell, Strash, thank you, all of you gentlemen, for coming on.
Mm-hmm.
And you have watched another episode of This Imaginary Life, which is part of the Indie Plus network. So please subscribe, and you'll get more of us. So thanks. Have a good night.